We light our chalice flame today, as chalice flames are lit in our brother and sister congregations across the world. At this time of political uncertainty, as our friends in the United States, those we know and those we don't, face further days of fear and worry, we will hear words from Martin Luther King Jr. Violence merely increases hate. Returning violence for violence only multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Welcome. Welcome to this space today. We gather at a time of immense change, particularly in the United States, with all eyes focused on Washington this week and on both the political and the public responses to the words of the American leaders at the moment. Now, Washington has, of course, provided the backdrop to such change many times before. Large crowds gathering to bring recognition and focus. Yet it's the skill of the leaders that determines the impact and the benefit of such a gathering. Now tomorrow, Monday the 18th of January, is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. It's a national holiday in America. It's a day of awareness to celebrate the achievements of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the civil rights leader. And Dr. King was born on January the 15th, 1929, and so the closest Monday to that day is celebrated nationally in memory of him. A decision endorsed and signed into law by President Reagan in 1982. Now, Martin Luther King campaigned tirelessly for the civil rights of all Americans, but particularly the African Americans who were subjected to some dreadful segregation and discrimination at the time. He campaigned tirelessly for a better, more equal, more fair world. In fact, not just more equal and more fair, but actually equal, actually fair. And Dr. King was driven by his religious convictions, a trust that his work was helping to create heaven on earth, following a call to recognise the interconnected and mutual relationships of all people. A caring voice grounded in love and in compassion. Selfless and with focus on others. And such a drive, grounded in faith, has inspired some of the most courageous acts of compassion in the past. Famously Martin Luther King Jr., of course, in the civil rights movement, but also others, such as the work of the Reverend Dietrich Bonhoeffer in the Second World War, and millions of others, less well known, working against the flow to bring love to the world. Now, the path of love and compassion can be guided by our faith in the world, our faith in humanity, our faith in good. Meetings such as this, albeit virtual at the moment, but even then, this kind of meeting provides this time when we might reflect on our own contributions to bringing heaven to earth. I welcome you to this virtual meeting space this morning. This time and this space are yours. I bid you welcome. Our first hymn today is a song of inspiration, a call to the spirit of earth, of love, of life. The words by Leanne Mitchell, set to music adapted by the late David Dawson, will be on your screens. Spirit of earth, root, stone, and tree. Our first reading today is a piece by the Unitarian Universalist minister, the Reverend Marta I Valentín. And this is from her collection, A Long Time Coming. And this piece talks of an inner motivation, of a call inside that leads us, should we wish to listen to it, to live lives of love, to follow a call. You must live and breathe. It must be the first thought in the morning and the last at night when twilight descends. It must be what you search for in the darkness, the light that leads you to who you are, where you are, what you are. It's understood already that you would die for it, but would you be willing to be born again for it, to change your cells for it? If you were dying of thirst, it would be your only drink of water, the one liquid to quench your thirst, sate your parched soul, resuscitate your empty lungs. In the dead of winter, it will be your fire, blanket, scarf, and hat. In the desert, it would be your mirage, your oasis. Even when you don't want it, can't stand it, despise it, it will come looking for you, haunt you, track you down, beg your attention and your love. For the purpose that you were blessed with knows no bounds. Only that if you are not paying attention, you will be lost until it finds you, until you heed its call and be who you and what you were meant to be. The words of Marta I Valentín. Let us come together in a time of prayer and stillness. Loving Spirit of this and every sacred moment, be with us in times of self-doubt, when we forget that dreams are not born in an instant, but must be nurtured, must be chosen over and over. When the world is telling us that we are dreaming too large, too wild, too unrealistic, or even too small. Remind us, gentle, patient Spirit, that any dream worth waiting for is worth working toward. Precious and loving God, today more than ever we dream of peace. Peace in our hearts, which have been clouded over with promises of a free world that will never come to pass if bought with the blood of violence. Dear God, today we dream of peace. Today we dream of peace. Eternal Spirit, Mother, Father, ever present if only we have eyes to see. We stand in awe in the presence of the universe. In its proper time, may the mystery unfurl before us. Though fettered by our material desires, may the depths of the Spirit uphold and guide us. May the great gifts of the earth sustain us. May the universe forgive our faults and our follies, and may we in equal measure be forgiving. May we ever turn our eyes toward the light, to dispel the darkness which would engulf us. We give thanks for the bounty of the universe, which abounds with power and glory beyond our greatest imaginings. If you wish to, I welcome you to join with me in the words of the last prayer, following the words on your screen. Eternal Spirit, we meet together that our lives may be transformed. May our misdeeds be washed from us, and may we be cleansed of our wayward deeds and thoughts. Each of us knows in our hearts we are not perfect. We've let ourselves down, and we seek to make amends. May we have truth in our inner souls, and may we recognize the joys of living lives in love. May we seek the presence of the divine to restore us. Heal us, O Spirit. Make us anew. Amen. Our second reading is a piece by Carla Grosch-Miller. Now, Carla is a United Reformed Church minister and a practical theologian. And in 2014, Carla published a book of Psalms, taken from the Psalms contained in the Hebrew Bible, ancient and heartfelt songs to God, of prayer, of praise, of question, of challenge. Carla refreshed and enriched their message into a new vocabulary. Each psalm is referred to as a redux version, which means to bring back. This, from Psalm 62, is Psalm 62 Redux. For you alone my soul waits in silence. You, my home, my hope. In you I rest secure, drawing from your deep well. I am strengthened. In the face of the derisive sneer, the dismissive outburst, the thoughtless jab, the blank stare, I stand still, listening for kernels of truth separating wheat from chaff. The core of my being is firm and gentle. I know who I am. There is room in me to love the unlovely, to ponder slings and arrows without retribution, to remain quiet when there is nothing to say, and to speak when it is time to speak. The whole of my being is held in your steady hands. I have nothing to fear and everything to learn. So it is for we who trust, we who wait in silence. The waiting is revealing. The eyes see the folly in vain, chasing after power, wealth, and privilege. The mind notes the clutch and cling of insecure humanity. The heart seeks to pledge, saying, as for me, I want to be a blessing to heaven and on earth. Once God has spoken, twice I have heard. Love is found in want and in waiting. The holy draws us in and strengthens us to stand. Psalm 62, Redux, by Carla Grosch-Miller. With those words of the psalmist, brought back, Redux, by Carla Grosch-Miller, with those words ringing in our minds, a call now to find the true self, the sacred core of our being. Our second hymn reminds us of that innate need to seek and find our humanity. The words, by Richard Bokey, will be on the screen. Lockdown continues. And although there is for me a frustrating regularity to the days and the weeks, we're heading not just to Groundhog Day now, but Groundhog Week, perhaps even Groundhog Month. Yet I know there is good reason for the restrictions, and I do encourage all to stick to the advice. However, there is also a monotony in many aspects of our lives now that we cannot claim all is the same. The unprecedented scenes from Washington over the last 10 days have snapped that. They've been astonishing in their cold reality. Many said this would happen. Many others claimed the system would self-regulate anything extreme. In a strange way, both were wrong and both were right. Division and fear now stalk the corridors and open spaces of power, yet there does seem too to be some genuine cries for peace, for compassion, for peaceful resolve. And in the midst of this, I, with my wife and with millions of parents and guardians across the country, are continuing to pick through the new world of homeschooling too. And I'm amazed at the strength of teaching and support that is going on, certainly from what I've seen. Now, our youngest is studying GCSE history at the moment, and this week, sitting in the same room, I eavesdropped on the live online lesson. And it was all about opposition to Nazism in Germany in the 1930s. Those brave individuals and groups that stood up to the all-powerful Nazi party, the politics of division and hatred, the skewed and terrible lies, and of course opposition to the central figure directing the hell, Adolf Hitler. Now, amongst many names that were mentioned, two stood out for me, given my own calling as a minister and my studies in the past. It was the names of Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Martin Niemöller. And it's one of those great coincidences this week. Bonhoeffer was an inspiration to Martin Luther King Jr. And as I mentioned earlier, tomorrow is Martin Luther King Jr. Day in the United States. Now, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was ordained in 1931. He spoke out against Hitler just 2 weeks after his arrival as German Chancellor in 1933. Bonhoeffer could see the dangers of totalitarianism that Hitler and his party appeared to be moving towards. And he fought against Hitler's interference in the ecclesiastical structures of the church. And in April 1933, 6 years before the Second World War, Bonhoeffer made a very public call for church resistance to the Nazi persecution of the Jews. Now, sadly, his calls were not heeded. So with Martin Niemöller, he founded a new church, the Confessing Church, in opposition to the German Christians who had aligned themselves with the Nazi Party. And he established a seminary for pastors to the Confessing Church and effectively lived on the run throughout the late 1930s, passing from village to village with his officially illegal ministers. Now, following that conviction of his faith, it was perhaps a surprise on the surface that during the war, Bonhoeffer joined the German military intelligence organization, the Abwehr. But what he knew was the Abwehr was, secretly, using its contacts and resources to help smuggle the Jews out of Germany, and also was the prime internal organization opposed to Hitler and his regime. And it was the Abwehr that were responsible for many of the various, all unsuccessful, assassination attempts on Hitler. And Bonhoeffer was a leading member of this organization. Now, sadly, the Abwehr's involvement in all this was discovered by accident when the SS were looking for something else and they discovered what the Abwehr were up to. And all the Abwehr leaders were rounded up and ultimately sent to Flossenbürg camp. And following a military trial, they were all executed. It was just 2 days before the camp was liberated by the Americans. But throughout his time in the camp even, Bonhoeffer had acted as chaplain. He tended to the pastoral needs of all those who sought them. And the legend of Bonhoeffer grew as a result of the tragedy of his death and the peaceful and loving way in which he lived his life had become better known and, one hopes, more influential. Now, it was Bonhoeffer who said, "The ultimate test of a moral society is the kind of world it leaves to its children." The ultimate test of a moral society is the kind of world it leaves to its children. And for Bonhoeffer, that was the driving force behind his religious life. The short time we have on earth must be spent always in making this world a better place. Now, as a theologian and a pastor, Bonhoeffer was very focused on the life and teachings of Jesus, putting the acts of discipleship into practice every day and wherever possible. And reliance on a grace of God that would come to a creedal Christian was not enough for Bonhoeffer. He called that a cheap grace. Instead, it was actions that mattered. He was certainly a committed Trinitarian. He firmly believed that Jesus was God incarnate. But for Bonhoeffer, this didn't mean Jesus did it all for you. This was the foundation on which he built his belief that action in this world was a deliberate requirement of God, that cloistered existence was insufficient. Putting the world right was the ultimate recognition of God's connection to the world. Now, I find this devotion to God, perhaps the all that is, the sacred divine, in which we are all connected and inspired. This devotion to God was astonishing in Bonhoeffer. There was a total submission, but it was not a passive submission. It was active. In God, in the very foundation of his faith, Bonhoeffer found the strength and the desire to work for justice in the world. He referred to living in God rather than with or alongside. He was held by love in all he did. He was directed by love in all he fought for. He died literally for love in the world. Now, Bonhoeffer found his truths in God, but also particularly in the words of the Psalms. He focused a lot on the Psalms, the Hebrew songs of praise and of prayer, of anguish, of happiness. And the Psalms are an astonishing resource for meditation and prayer and resolve. Now, we heard earlier Carla S. Grosch-Miller's refresh, the redux of Psalm 62. And this psalm in particular is a reflection on the need to place your trust in God rather than in people or in the material world. It's a reflection on the need to be held by the divine, to have the stillness inside to, as Carla says, I stand still, listening for kernels of truth, separating wheat from chaff. The core of my being is firm and gentle. I know who I am. And on. Love is found in want and in waiting. The holy draws us in and strengthens us to stand. For me, this idea of submission, with a greater sense of love and focus, for many known as God, but recognised in so many other ways by others, recognised in ways far more. This acceptance and trust in the greater interconnected web of everything. A deeper call and connection to a truth that stands up to oppression. A truth that stands up to anything that tries to bring down that interconnectedness. To a love that heals division. To a love that seeks to place all in the embrace of all that is, with no unfair favour given to any. A deeper love of selfless care. Now, Marta I Valentín, in our first reading, hungered for this connection too. As the refreshed Psalm 62 reminds us that in drawing from the deep well of the divine, our core is stilled yet strong. We know who we are when we find that connection. And Marta reflects that this sacred bond is what we each search for in the darkness. And it's the light that leads us to find who we are. This indescribable presence is a fire in the winter, an oasis in the desert, and even when we don't want it, it will come looking for us. And then, for me, the perfect line. For the purpose that you were blessed with knows no bounds. For the purpose that you were blessed with knows no bounds. Bonhoeffer too found his purpose in this way. Not a separate entity to be obeyed or feared, rather a presence, a blessing upon him, a God in which he and everything existed. A deeper love that enabled him, supported him, warmed and soothed him. Now, all these things have been made more stark in recent days. The growing resistance to a seemingly unstoppable tide of division and violence that had previously been allowed to fester. Yet despite the television pictures of the terrifying violence recently, there are stories too of those who opposed. There is work in hand to put things right. Stories of police that led protesters away from those they sought to harm. Voices across America and the world opposing the violence, opposing the stoking of tensions led by that central figure. So I find it strangely appropriate that this Monday, the first day of the week in which the presidency changes, This Monday is celebrated as Martin Luther King Jr. Day, a perfect connection to Washington itself, and a lesson in how protest politics can bring love rather than hate. Now, Martin Luther King Jr. was a Baptist minister. He was a leader of the civil rights movement in America from 1955 until his assassination in 1968. But in 1963, Dr. King was one of the organisers of the March on Washington. The day brought up to 500,000 people into Washington to advocate for the civil and social rights of African Americans, who, until that point, were still subject to legal discrimination and excluded from the political system in many places. Dr. King's closing speech on that day, it was August 1963, is well known. I have a dream. And the March on Washington, which was huge, passionate, and peaceful, is cited and credited with helping steer the 1964 Civil Rights Act and the 1965 Voting Act, which brought a far greater degree of legal equality in America. Now, like Dietrich Bonhoeffer before him, who he quoted and referred to often, Dr. King was inspired and driven by his faith, giving himself over to the divine, working to bring heaven to earth. The importance of faith and connection was essential. Now, Martin Luther King famously said, "Use me, God. Show me how to take who I am, who I want to be, and what I can do, and use it for a greater purpose than myself." Now, this approach, it's one that we heard from the psalmist thousands of years ago, of taking who we are, finding who we are, offering and receiving a call, and using that core self to deliver a purpose far greater than ourselves. Now, for each of us, this approach to life is one I suggest we reflect upon. To look within ourselves, to find a still, gentle and strong core that might draw a greater connection to a deeper love. We each of us have the ability to follow a call from a deeper place, to work for a greater justice in the world, for a purpose greater than personal interest. Our Unitarian belief in an interconnected web of all existence draws us surely to recognizing our ability to work for love, for justice, for truth, to do good unto our neighbours, to play a part in the sacred work to being harmony, equality, and kindness to the world, to be still, to hear the call, and to act. Now, this is the time, usually in our services, where we move into a time of stillness and reflection, which I'm going to ask us to do today, but I'm going to ask us to do it slightly differently. Today, as we settle our bodies, relaxing and connecting ourselves to something greater, we shall hear some words of Martin Luther King. We will hear the words of his speech to the March on Washington. And as you listen, perhaps reflect on the calm, gentle, and yet powerful message contained. It's a recording that made on the day of him speaking. The conviction of Dr. King, the use of positive words, driving unity and compassion for a better world for all. And just as Dietrich Bonhoeffer reminded us that we will be remembered by the world we leave for our children, so Martin Luther King too speaks of creating that better world for all our children, of a call to follow the dream of a better world. The contrast with other, more recent speeches cannot be more stark. In the words of Marta I Valentin's prayer we heard earlier, today we dream of peace. For today we dream of peace. After the words, there will be stillness, followed by music to continue our reflection on how we too might dream of peace, how we too might draw on our core stillness to bring love and care to the world. The words of Dr. King.
I still have a dream.
Yes.
It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day
Yes.
this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day, down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children be able to sing with new meaning, my country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring. From the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire, let freedom ring. From the mighty mountains of New York, let freedom ring. From the heightening Alleghanies of Pennsylvania, let freedom ring. From the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado, let freedom ring. From the curvaceous slopes of California. But not only that, let freedom ring from Stone Mountain of Georgia. Let freedom ring from Lookout Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.
Some closing words. Spirit of life, we give thanks for your presence, for light and for love, for night and for change. Our worship is over, but our service continues. As we depart, may there be peace among us all, now and forever.